For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stuart Messinger. I'm a planner with the Chase and Companies, and it was my pleasure to work with a zoning update committee that the town appointed for a year and a half now. And about a month ago, the zoning update committee delivered its draft amendments to the town board. So we're here tonight to talk about those. There's a handout which is a summary of the changes, so if anybody doesn't have one, it's right here. As Bernie said, there are a lot of changes. And if I were to go through all of them in detail, you would be hearing me droning on for a couple hours. And I trust you don't really want that. So what I thought I would do is, in the space of perhaps 15 or 20 minutes, try to go through what I thought were the most important things. And some of them are really categories of changes rather than detail by detail. And then answer questions, have a discussion, and so forth. So that's my plan. So from the top, and just kind of following the outline, I tell people that maybe 30 or 40% of a zoning ordinance is in the definitions. And when we took a look at your ordinance, there were uses which were listed as allowed uses that weren't defined. There were obsolete definitions. We added uses that needed definition, so there's a lot of new definitions. We also got rid of some definitions, definitions that were obsolete either because we got rid of the use, or in many cases we updated the use, we changed it, and so we had to amend the definition. And sometimes we amended definitions to address problems. And then we revised a lot of definitions, and those were principally to address specific problems that we came through. There's probably more than 100 definition changes alone. So that's really mundane and technical, but a big part of it, believe it or not. We added some new zoning districts to the map. We added two new zoning districts, and we made some changes in the boundaries. The new districts that we added are a medium density residential district, which is located over here, this little orange area here. And the intent of that district is to create a place where we could encourage pretty much high density apartments or condominiums. And when I say high density, I mean like 12 units an acre, not cityscape or anything, but basically a place where we're encouraging that. It creates affordable housing. It's in a location next to the city. We think it's kind of a good location from a walking distance. So we did that. We also created a wellhead protection overlay district. And this is a district that you see in these blue circles here, here, and I'm probably missing a couple. There's 3 of them here, one here, and
Cadyville out west?
Cadyville out west.
Right at the bottom.
Underneath the brown.
Right there.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so there's one there. And what those are is they're an overlay district that goes for 1,000 feet around the town's public water supply wells. And basically what it does is it limits the kinds of things you can do within 1,000 feet of the public water supply well. It doesn't prohibit you from building a house or do anything that you could do in the underlying district, but it prohibits things like outdoor storage of fuel and chemicals, and limits some septic disposal and so on. Pretty common thing, a good thing to do. We I think I'll hold the other map changes till I talk about the map in a little more detail. So those were new districts, and I'm going to skip the things that I don't think are terribly substantive. But a couple other sort of district-related substantive things is we took the old airport development districts, and we made some pretty significant changes. Among the least significant, perhaps, is that we've retitled them as the A1 and the A2 districts, and we kind of repurposed them and changed the uses. So later in the summary, where you go through and you look at the list of uses in each district, you'll see maybe some lengthier changes in those districts. We added purpose statements for each district. A simple thing that's usually in most ordinances. It kind of will help the boards when they're in decision making and trying, especially to look at a thing like a special use permit or a variance, to go back to the purpose of the district and see if the special use or the variance is consistent with the purpose of the district. We made some changes to the non-conforming use structure section. The one that I think is significant is we added a little section that makes explicit that if you have an approved lot, an approved non-conforming lot, that was approved prior to the date of the enactment of the ordinance, it's still a legal lot. You don't have to go get a variance on it. You might have to get a variance if you can't build according to the setbacks in the district it's located, but building on itself is grandfathered. And that's really a typical thing in the zoning ordinance that you don't have. It sort of protects people who have older lots and approved subdivisions. We spent a lot of time in the various supplementary regulations. I found that the supplementary regulations often get glossed over or ignored, but they're the place in an ordinance where a lot of the details happen. They handle all of the things that aren't found basically in the use and area tables, which are the guts of the zoning ordinance. And so I don't, again, want to go through all of them in detail, but I kind of want to hit the things that I think are most important. And the first one of those has to do with the parking regulations. The existing parking regulations in your ordinance are very vague and very broad. They basically just sort of contain categories of use, residential, commercial, or industrial, and have kind of a one-size-fits-all strategy for parking. A more common approach is the one we took here, which is to give a parking standard for every use. So it's a little bit lengthy, but it's a little more detailed, a little more nuanced. We brought into the zoning law some of the standalone laws that the town has passed over time. One of them is a shopping center parking law that applies to shopping centers over an acre, I think it is. Brought that into the ordinance. We added a section regulating commercial vehicle parking in residential districts. The idea is that in a residential district you can't start to put multiple tractor trailers on a property. It's one of those little nagging things. We added a section about idling of diesel vehicles, and again, that can be a troublesome thing where people park a tractor trailer and idle it for a period of time while they do stuff. So we added that. We added a clause, we added some home occupations, and then we added a clause having to do with limiting the number of commercial pickup and deliveries that you can have. This is sort of when it's a direct effect of the internet age, where people are doing internet businesses essentially out of their home, and if you have enough pickup and deliveries, you're not really a home occupation anymore. The idea of a home occupation is something that you do, and there's really not a lot of exterior evidence of what you're doing. But if you're running delivery trucks in 20 or 30 times a day because you have a really successful eBay business, that's too many. So we added that section. We completely rewrote your access management section. Access management section, the idea here is to encourage uses to have a single curb cut on a commercial street wherever possible, and to share curb cuts internally between adjacent uses. So we're trying to get people into shopping areas off of fewer curb cuts, have fewer conflicting points on the main street. It doesn't say that you have to do it, but it's a set of guidelines for the planning board to apply. We made some changes to the mining section just to make it consistent with state law, not really a big deal. We spent a lot of time on agricultural uses, and detention, a surprising amount of time on agricultural uses. Detention there being recognizing that there's still a lot of rural land in Plattsburgh, and people like to have the ability to keep farm animals versus potential impacts with neighbors and so forth. And we had a lot of discussion about poultry. Poultry is a big issue, in some places. So what we finally came up with is we basically said if you keep, a pet or an animal in the house, we don't regulate it. If you want to live with the goats, you can. It's okay. We basically said that you can't. That we created a set of small animals. We call them fur-bearing animals. We defined them, and those are things like your rabbits, your guinea pigs, things that people might keep outdoors, but really don't bug anybody. You can pretty much do that wherever you want. And then we divided our farm animals into small and large farm animals. And a small farm animal is a thing like, what's a small farm animal? I gotta remember the definition. The big farm animals I remember. The big farm animals are your cow, your horse, your donkey.
And we have an ostrich in there?
Yeah, we have ostriches in there. Yeah, an ostrich is a small farm animal. Sheep is a small farm animal. Thank you. So small farm animals need 3 acres. Big farm animals need 5 acres. Poultry needs 2 acres. So the chicken advocates got a little bit of a break there. But and those all apply, by the way, in the R2, R4, and MH districts only. So if you're in an R1 and an R3, that you can't keep a farm animal as we define it. We think that's workable. It's not a whole lot different than the scheme you have now, but it's a little more nuanced. We added some rules about beekeeping because you didn't address it, and you have a lot of orchards here, and that's a reasonable thing to think about. We clarified regulations for farm worker housing. Your regs weren't concordant with state law. Basically, people can, if they have farm workers, you're allowed to have a trailer or trailers for those farm workers to live in as long as they're working on the property. So we added that, and we made sure that gardens are not farming because your law was a little sketchy on that. And you have existing farm stand rules, so people can have a garden and have a farm stand and continue to do that. There's some just kind of size limits to keep the home farm stand from becoming the commercial farm stand. So like I said, we spent a lot of time on that. One of the things as we repurposed the A1 and the A2 districts, as making the A1 more of a kind of a manufacturing district, we got rid of a requirement that you had for everything to be enclosed. So it's possible in the A1 district to have materials that are stored outside, raw materials, for manufacturing purposes. So there's a change. And then we did 3 sections that we spent a lot of time on, and that I think people will be especially interested in. One has to do with buffering and landscaping. One has to do with design guidelines, architectural design guidelines for commercial and industrial uses. And the third has to do with lighting standards. And notice the difference in the use of the words guidelines, and then standards. The landscaping and buffering are guidelines for commercial uses. They don't apply to industrial uses. They don't apply to residential uses, just commercial uses. They include some design requirements, which are things like how many plants, what percentage of a parking lot ought to be landscaped. And they refer to a manual, it's actually a manual out of Vermont, of appropriate species for the planning board to look at. So they're advisory, they're guidelines, not standards, and they're waivable by the planning board. But they give the planning board something to say, this is what we're striving for, and if somebody says, well, I can't, you need to show us why you can't, as opposed to I won't, which hopefully the planning board would say, well, that's not a very good answer. The design guidelines are similar. They cover things like site layout, orientation of the building on a lot, architecture, and energy efficiency. We spent a good deal of time talking about architecture, and the issue is that you don't have sort of a defining characteristic that says this is Plattsburgh. If I was on Cape Cod, it's pretty easy to define in a zoning ordinance what buildings ought to look like. There's a style. You don't have that in Plattsburgh. But it's still possible to ask people to do things like have not blank walls, but have walls that might have windows or other kinds of color treatment, that might have articulation of their roofs, that might have things like awnings, that might break up the building physically in different ways. And so that's what these guidelines do with respect to architecture. And they make similar kind of standard-based recommendations for energy efficiency, use of materials, siting of the building. Again, they're not standards, they're guidelines, they're waivable by the planning board, but they give you something to strive for. And it's funny, because when I come into town on Route 3 each time that I come to Plattsburgh, and I think there's a good-looking building, and there's one that can use help, and there's a good-looking building. And most of the better-looking buildings are newer buildings. And I think the planning board has kind of already internalized this idea and are trying to work with people to accomplish it. The third category, kind of a big change in respect to a building form that I mentioned, are lighting standards. And these are standards, not guidelines. And so the difference is these are mandatory, they're not waivable outside of variance. Okay? And what they do is they set actual limits on the amount of light that can be cast off of a site, how high light poles can be, the amount of light you can have in proximity to a building and so forth. And the idea there is really to try to minimize light pollution. And these really come from work that the planning board is already trying to apply to uses, so it's not something new, it codifies something that they're doing now. The next section, and I would say we spent a lot of time on this as well, is signs. Signs are always a sticky matter. They're pretty technical, a lot of them, but the upshot was that we tried to create a system that was a lot simpler than the one that you had. And the highlights are sign height for freestanding signs is capped at 20 feet. That's something that you have now, but it wasn't really specific in the ordinance how that was defined. You can have a 50 square foot freestanding sign if you have 4 or fewer businesses in use, and it can be up to 100 square feet if you have more. Those aren't really very big signs for what that's worth. You're also allowed a wall sign, and this was a change as we made the size of the wall sign proportional to the building. That's kind of important because if you're allowed to have, a 100 square foot wall sign or whatever on a really tiny building, kind of looks out of place. The same size on a really big, same size sign on a really big building also looks out of place. So what we did is we tried to create a formula that relates the size of a wall sign to the size of the building. There's a max, it's capped. Okay? It's an approach that other communities are using, and I think it's a good approach. We did a lot of cleanup, things about regulating animated signs and posted bills and so on. I know what we did. We tried to address the idea that people are putting out sidewalk signs and just kind of that proliferation. And so what we did is said you could have a sandwich board sign, which is sort of a neat, one of these kind of things, 8 square feet, and then there's some rules about that. It kind of, I don't know how much of your day you spend running around looking at signs, your guys, but I imagine if they wanted to, they could do it full time. And so we're trying to create a reasonable system that people can advertise their business without cluttering up the road. If you have a multiple story building, you're obviously allowed some additional signage on the second story. And then we created a kind of an expanded list of exempt signs so that the code enforcement officer's job would be a lot easier. I mean, there's a ton of things like Christmas decorations and, lawn signs and bring our troop home signs and the kinds of things that you see regularly, but that the ordinance didn't address. So we created a lot of them. So that was signs. Site plan review. We made a lot of technical changes to the site plan review, but in terms of actual substance, I wouldn't say that we did a lot. And the same thing with the special use permit section. We really didn't do a lot of substantive things there. All of our changes were technical. And so unless somebody has questions about them, I'm not really going to go into those. The section that we did do a complete rewrite of was the Plan Development District section. Presumably we all know what those are. It's basically it allows somebody to propose a project that's not allowed by the underlying zoning. It's a form of allowed rezoning that the town board can only act on, and it's not, you don't automatically get it, you have to apply. The section that you had now wasn't really workable because nobody was trying to use it, and it contained a bunch of requirements that frankly didn't make a lot of sense. It wasn't clear what you were trying to encourage. And so as we talked about it, the idea in the Plan Development District is to try to encourage somebody to come up with a use that's maybe unique, that has a mix of different uses, potentially allows some higher density uses, and it would be desirable to the town. And so what we did is we said that you can only apply for a planned development district in the commercial districts, the S and FC districts, basically the big four commercial districts in town, and a portion of the R2 district adjacent, and that's what this R2 overlay district here is. This is where I said there were a couple of other zoning map changes. I wanted to talk about this one here. So this is a place that you can also apply for a planned development district. you have to have at least 2 acres, or I'm sorry, you have to have at least 5 acres. Except if you're in a neighborhood commercial district, that's the other kind of commercial district you can have one in, and then it would be 2 acres. So you see, by limiting them to really the commercial acres in this one portion of the R2, we're only putting these in already built up areas of the town. And then what we did was we created a list of permitted uses, and the permitted uses are pretty broad. They're most commercial, most of the kinds of basic commercial uses, but also high density housing, but not single family housing. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. Did we add that at the end? Somebody will need to look on that. So, but the intent was multifamily housing. And then there's a set of bulk regulations, and what's key in those is that there isn't a density restriction. So somebody could propose something under a PDD that was pretty high density, and that's by design. The idea is to let somebody have more density if they're proposing something that would be of benefit to the town. If somebody comes in and says, well, I want to have 200 units an acre and I need a PDD, you'd probably say no to them. You want to know what else is in the PDD that's good for the town. That's why there's a pretty wide array of allowed uses. And then we basically created a whole new procedure. And the procedure is not anything unusual or out of the ordinary. It's a procedure that most PDDs follow. Essentially, you apply to the town board refers to the planning board does its review, it goes back to the town board, they make a decision. SECRA needs to happen. It's very common that PDDs go through an environmental impact statement or some kind of environmental review. And then there are standards for PDDs. So we created a set of standards for the boards to consider as they review it. If the section works, you'll get some innovative development, and that would be the goal. No single family. Good. I didn't want to misspeak. Thanks. So that's the idea. Somebody can't use it and say, well, I want a higher density of single family housing, because there's nothing innovative or in it for the town in that. Okay. About a year ago now, we passed the Airport Development District. We just brought that into this zoning. It was living as its own standalone law, so we did that. We've already discussed the Wellhead Protection Overlay District. We did some cleanup in the manufactured home section. We brought your wood boiler law into the zoning ordinance. We brought your small wind energy facilities law into the zoning ordinance, which, if anybody criticizes us for adding pages, that's why. It's the wind energy law. We did some just technical administration cleanups that I won't go into. Now, if you go to page 6 of your summary, I created a table here that summarizes all of the changes to the use regulations. And I'm not going to go through them all. Thank you for that. But I think it kind of neatly shows what we did. In many cases, these changes are really intended to take into account the new definitions or the new laws. For example, farm worker housing. We added farm worker housing in the districts, in most districts where agriculture is allowed, because you have to allow farm worker housing. Others of them are just sort of cleanups of terms. So the term, when I say, in the top row, we deleted convent and parish house. It's not, we're not against convents and parish houses. It's that we redefine them into the term place of worship. There's a lot of that in here. So if you see something and you're scratching your head, it's often something like that. There was kind of a definitional reason for it. That said, there are some districts that have some kind of big changes to them. And at your leisure, you can probably look especially at the 2 big commercial districts, the C and the SC, the I district, the IP district, the 2 industrial districts have some pretty big changes in terms of mostly new uses that we added. And then the A1 and A2, formerly the AB1 and AB2 districts. Those are where most of the changes are. Most of them are additions, not deletions. And then, of course, we made some changes to the area regulations. Not a lot of big changes to those. The biggest thing was we reduced the minimum lot size for 2-family units in a lot of the districts. The reasoning being that two-family units sort of function as a form of more affordable housing in a lot of instances. And so by reducing the lot sizes in some of the districts, you increase the affordability there. I'll be interested to see how that plays, that particular change. We did that in most of the main residential districts. We reduced the minimum lot size for multifamily condominium and townhouses in the commercial district, again for the same reason, increased density, bring some life into those districts. Obviously, we added bulk regulations for that medium density residential district. We reduced the height for multiple family dwelling units and condominiums in the C district and increased townhouses and non-residential districts, so everything is 60 feet. You had some kind of funky different sizes there. And then we did some sort of cleanup on how internal walls are handled in family systems. So then the last thing was the zoning map, and I just wanted to point out a couple of the other things that we haven't touched on. I already mentioned that we added the MDR district, and this R2 overlay district, and the wellhead protection overlay district. So those are new districts, and I've talked about the renaming and some boundary adjustment here. We expanded your land conservation district. Basically what we did is we took as much of the undeveloped land as we could along the Saranac River and added buffers. In some cases the buffer is 150 feet along here, and here it's 200 feet. Basically protect the river, keep development away from it, and hopefully allow for a trail along the river at some point in the future. We adjusted the boundaries of the neighborhood commercial districts in a few places. Not really big adjustments, just really trying to take into account what's happening in the neighborhood. So we had a shrinkage here, an expansion here, a bit of an expansion here, some minor additions down in Treadwell Mills. Nothing really major, but kind of some tweaks. We contracted this industrial district on Route 22. This district used to extend further north. This now becomes R2. One of the findings in our comp plan is that you guys have an awful lot of industrial land that's kind of underutilized. So the thought was, before expanding that out a little bit farther along Route 22, we'd like to see get built up what you already have. So that was kind of the theory of that one. We did a little contraction of the R3 district here on Cumberland Head, going to R4. We made some boundary amendments to the IP district on Tom Miller Road. So we didn't really make huge wholesale changes to the map. We didn't rezone a lot of people. We kind of expanded the C. That was the other thing I should have had on here. So that was missed. So we should have expanded. We expanded the C at the expense of the SC district. A little more intense commercial, basically, at the expense of what was SC, but not rezoning people's houses or rezoning residential land. That's a lot to digest, especially in summary form. So I think now would be a good time to ask questions and talk about it. I know we have a lot of committee members here, and if you guys want to amplify on anything that I've said maybe before, it's question time.
Tom Metz, I noticed that there's color coding your new MDR west of Montana, which is the northern red-orange, and there's a southern section of red-orange along Route 9.
Yep.
Is that also MDR?
No, that's a neighborhood commercial. And we about ran out of colors on this map. It's so busy.
Four-color problem.
Yeah.
A secondary question is in the agricultural, where you define large, small animals and such. Did you include how many rabbits in 2 acres?
No, because a rabbit is a fur-bearing animal, and you can get as many as you want. Go crazy.
For the small and large, is it 1 animal per 3 acres or 5?
No, we talked about that. We had a discussion about having the 3 and 5 be a minimum, and then requiring additional acreage for each cow or pig or horsey. But we decided not to, because the other way that these work is that they require that manure storage be 100 feet from the property line. So there's sort of a self-limitation because of that. So we talked about it, but we didn't do that. Yes, sir.
The neighborhood commercial in Katyville, the expansion,
Mm-hmm.
could you tell me what that takes in?
Can we zoom this up?
Yeah.
That'd be the best thing to do so that you guys can all see it. I'll ask Trevor to zoom us in and we'll go from there. Yeah, there you go.
Probably get a little closer.
You see that? And so now we gotta remember, now if somebody's gonna remember what we had here, I believe that we have, and I'm gonna look to staff here, I believe we added a couple of parcels here.
Fire station,
Fire station and the church.
rectory?
And you also got the cemetery there.
Yeah, where the cemetery was on the other side of the road, the church, or the fire station from the other side, and then Park Row, as, you can go down Route 3
Yeah,
and
this
Park
way.
Row, to include the, is there a duplex there, there's the other church.
We did some additional, where the store is right here and added a few extra parcels, the Gulf, Katyville Gulf. And then some of the other uses on the other side, the laundromat and dry cleaning weren't included in them, so we added those as well.
But you didn't add in, you didn't take in, the wood finishing,
Yep, that's
You
this
did?
parcel right here.
and
Right- right there.
how about what used to be Finnan's, beer
Right across
garden?
the road,
Is that part of it too?
correct.
Okay.
We kind of, our approach, just to add on to what Stuart said, was if there was a use in general that was sort of non-conforming and historically what we would call a neighborhood commercial use, if possible and not out of place, we tried to combine those in the hamlets. And that's was the main point in Katyville, was to take those uses that were already functioning under in that way and rope them in.
The only one we didn't, John, was the old, Jocks.
Yeah, the
We
red
did not
one.
include that because there wasn't parking, there wasn't land. Didn't think it could ever come back as that, and the gentleman that owns it, wants to change it back into residential. So that was the only one that historically was, commercial in that area.
Now, what about the big red barn across from the fire station? Is that zone commercial or neighborhood commercial, or is that still residential?
Can you zoom
Yeah,
back
I'm
in?
gonna go back.
Because that's, I think that's being utilized mostly for construction.
For storage?
Yeah,
Is that behind the fire station?
no, it's right across the road on the left-hand side
On the other
when you
side.
go up towards the church.
Then in that case,
Is
no,
it
you're
included?
speaking about over here.
No, on the other side.
The other side.
Right where your point is. No,
So here's the
right
fire
there.
station.
Side the road, west
Right
side of the
there.
road.
So if we
West side.
did,
You're gonna, where you're
You
gonna,
got
is
it.
it-
Yeah,
is
right
it the
there.
first
This is,
parcel
yeah,
in
this
front?
is the barn, this is the fire station.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
barn.
Then that's
Post
correct.
office.
Okay, so that's all.
Yep, that's included, basically the whole, west side of Church Street, to the corner just past the church and the fire station, fairground on the other side of the road is all included as well. The whole fire station parcel.
Yep.
I got a quick question. I'm assuming that that you define what is a small fur-bearing animal because DEC has its own definition.
Yeah, different definition. Yes, sir. Yeah, good question, but no, it's a different definition, yeah.
I was just thinking we'd end up with mink farms or something.
With a wild boar.
Yeah,
How does that work?
Turns out you can't regulate wild boar, they're gonna come in anyway.
Any breed or variety of badger, ferret, guinea pig, mink, muskrat, otter, rabbit, raccoon, skunk, or pheasant.
So are we worried about me?
no, I was just using that because years ago, there used to be a lot of mink ranches or farms in the area. I'm talking 40, 50 years ago.
What else? Go at the board, you guys have questions? Did you read?
When will we be able to get a copy of the proposed changes?
You guys would have to decide to put this up on the web, I assume.
I would think that if it's all right with the board, you should have a resolution for next Monday night that will receive and place on file the referral from Stewart, from the committee. And then you'll identify that there are other parties that are vested with responsibility for review, zoning board, planning board, county planning board. And that you'll also put it on the, I would think you'd want to put it on the town website. And make it available for review here in the town. And then, start that process that then unfolds, eventually leading up to a public hearing.
Why do we have to have a resolution put on the website?
Well, because it's kind of all part of the package.
Resolution is to receive.
Acknowledging it as the official draft to be posted.
I mean, we'll make arrangements so that as soon as the board acts then on Tuesday, hopefully it would be all set and ready to go. I mean, in the meantime. if
And
not-
it'll be clearly defined as a draft, right?
Yeah,
And when you post it, you ought to post the summary with it, just because
yeah.
it's hard to follow without the summary. It's hard to follow with the summary.
Now, in your overlay district for your wells, you have 1,000 feet,
Yeah.
and does that just encompass the area where the wells are themselves? And that's it?
Yes, it's 1,000 feet around the physical well.
We took the actual physical location and the coordinate system, and then do a 1,000-foot radius from that point.
So that's it right there.
Yeah, these are 3 circles. Well, these are overlaid because there's two wells in here. Same with this. You'll see it's kind of 2 spheres.
Trevor, you might point out that there's a little bit of an overlap between the circle and.
Yeah, that's what I was just explaining, how it would be 2 circles right here because there's actually 2 wells.
Yeah,
But the rules aren't quite as strict.
yeah, 2,000.
You'll see the other well over here in on Goungeville.
Yeah, does that take in my
That's the
house?
one that's kind of cut off by
You
the.
can still live there, John.
I know, but can I still do what I want with it?
I don't know, you'll have to review the
If I'm in that overlay district or not.
What else you got for questions? Comments?
Steve, are you comfortable that the common and reoccurring requests for variances were addressed to try and have a new ordinance that will reduce some of those that were commonly given?
Our goal was to try to put the zoning board of appeals out of business. I'd say we got.
Unfortunately, we didn't do that.
We got 70% of it right. Corporate America will never make happy. They're always gonna want bigger signs. If we would have gave them the world, they still would have wanted more. But for the recurring ones that our zoning board of appeals see, for the accessory structures, clearly defined it, gave them more leeway. We had quite a few other side yard setback issues I think we cleared up. The only one is the signs. It'll always be zoning board of appeals. I don't think we'll ever, and it's a good problem because that means businesses still want to come in. But trying to go from this start forward, once this is adopted, saying this is what it is. This is what the committee, this is what the town members said we don't want to see anymore. You're really going to have to prove a hardship to go any bigger than that.
I think as Stu indicated, there are certain places, I think you used Cape Cod,
Yeah. That's a good example.
where we will see the corporate signs, you and I've talked about at Hilton, where you'll see the corporate signs that absolutely have to be conformed to when we don't come, and they conform to the local codes. So we're getting wiser with that also, but there are some that I think you had seen that we really needed to update, that weren't created unnecessary process. So I'm glad we were able to get that in there.
And they got a lot bigger signs than I would have allowed for signs.
That's why we had a large committee.
Yeah, I know.
Phil will, I'll lean on you a little for, and you can lean on whoever for some guidance with the language in the resolution that we talked about. So it does map out for us the next steps and procedures, certainly CJ and Jim as well, but I know CJ, you work on.
Should be a very similar, we did this a zoning update in 2007. Should be very close to that.
So when you
We
receive,
got to include the seeker component in that as well.
presumably when you receive, you'll also refer.
And this one, I know you and I talked many times, you were driven, the mandate was to now conform to the guidelines and vision of the new master plan.
These changes are in conformance with the master plan.
That's good.
The master plan proved pretty handy, by the way, in so doing. I thought.
I think we continue our economic development project too, to use that master plan as the broader stroke, and then, you know, what are the pieces we need to put in place to work to achieve those goals. Before long, we'll probably look at a revision of that again, such as the cycle.
This is, you know, the 10-year cycle of master plan and then subsequent zoning effort behind that reflects another evolution of the community of this town. And so actually, with the experience that staff and the committee brought forward and the consultant brought in some components that will actually maybe encourage development. The PDD, which has not been utilized at all since the 2000 zoning update, may now have some interest in it. Some of the multifamily commercial housing may get more of an interest.
I think your timeliness is great. We've had activity during this difficult economic period, but with optimism that this too shall pass, we'll be ready, and things certainly have installed for us.
Stuart did mention, you know, there were clearly some changes in density, which will result in, we'll see as a consequence of the adoption of this, should you, the board do so. We'll see some areas get increased density associated with them.
It's good. And it's controlled.
Yeah, it'll be up to the planning board to kind of work with it.
Is there any, did they address the political signs at all? The exemptions to them and what have you? Or are they back into
We
where?
left it the way you guys are regulating it. You guys have a law, I think, about that. We had our longest email train was on that subject. We conducted some of our meetings by email debate, and that was the winner, right? But we left it as you guys
So they're allowable along the highway now, just like they always were, and,
But they all said they pick them up 3 days later, right?
yeah, but that's not the problem. The problem is putting them out, and today with the cars driving, and you have to pull over when you get a phone call or something, and there they are, and they get tangled up in your car, and they got sharp wires, plus the guys that are mowing, that I talked to the state workers, and they hate them with a passion because the sign blows off, the wicket falls down, those things get caught up in their mowers. You know, I think that's something that should have really had a hard look at, and they shouldn't be allowed in any right of way as far as I'm concerned.
We had a lengthy debate, is what I can tell you. Left it as it was.
You spoke about architectural review kind of in passing. What kind of vision do you folks have about what Plattsburgh should look like? Or do you have one?
We didn't, you know, we didn't have a vision. We'd actually addressed that in the comprehensive plan. And one of the questions we asked ourselves in the comprehensive plan was, do we want to create an image for Plattsburgh? And we couldn't come up with one. You know, frankly, I mean, is it Adirondack? Is it colonial? What is it?
Southwest stucco.
Right.
But there are some positive signs if you look at Route 3, that's not Route 3, but at Tom Miller Road.
Yeah.
And you'll see that each development seems to be kind of building on the last one, or, you know, that there's
Yeah.
there's clearly a
Yeah.
pattern there. And so that's, and that comes with discussion from the board. They require elevation drawings, there's a dialogue that takes place.
You're gonna get better looking buildings.
So, you
Um,
know, the board hasn't set any standards, but we've asked the most recent people.
So you do have kind of an idea?
Yeah, you know, we had one client come in and he wanted to do vinyl siding, and we said, yeah, I don't think so. You
So
know,
what did he do?
He's gonna go to cement board, you know, like color to match the other buildings around it. He came in with an architectural drawing with a very flat wall with a few windows. We said, nah, that's not gonna work, come back with something else.
Or a tin roof.
And we've also asked some of the major chains, you know, they came in and said, no, you're not gonna put up an orange building, come back with something else. And they go, well, there is nothing else. And it's like, yes, there is. Yeah, every corporation will comply with you if you push them. So we have been leaning towards a lot of that.
Good. Because I know during the public hearing for the comprehensive land use plan, I asked about architectural review, and you said Plattsburgh wasn't ready for it, and I kind of pulled my hair out at that point.
Well, we debated standards versus guidelines, and we don't have a theme, which I think was the first paragraph.
Yeah.
What we have here are some guidelines that will, I think, help you make better buildings. And I think you're ready for that. There'll be some kickback, but I think you're ready for it.
I think in new developments, we'll see more.
That's good, I think it's important.
How does the mining, how's that regulated?
Mining less than 1,000 cubic yards a year is entirely up to you. And it's basically, you know, you have I can't remember if it's special use permit. I think it's special use permit, it is special use permit. And so it's that normal procedure. Over 1,000 cubic yards a year is a DEC permit. DEC usurps most of your local control in terms of what you can review. However, you still can decide where it's allowed. Okay, and so here you allow mining in your industrial district, and I believe the R2 district, and that's a change. And I need to look to make sure I have that right. The question caught me by surprise, but I think that's correct.
Which accommodated any existing activity that,
Yeah, we added mining to R2. The idea, what we were thinking about is sand and gravel mining, because that's where the resource is. So industrial district, R2 district. More than 1,000 cubic yards a year, DEC mainly regulates, you have limited regulation ability. The smaller ones you still regulate through special use permits.
So we don't have specific types of mining activity?
We exempted at we prohibited at your request, oil and natural gas extraction. Other than that, any kind of mining is okay.
And does the DEC have can they overrule that?
No, DEC can't overrule local zoning control. You decide where it goes, and small, you totally regulate. Large, they usurp most regulation.
How about clear cutting and forestry? Is that,
We had a long talk about that, and we did not want to get into regulating logging, was the short answer.
how about clear cutting?
We didn't regulate it. We talked about regulating it in the context of clearing a site in advance of development and decided not to.
again, doesn't DEC play a role if there's a concern? I think
Well, you get into
Hammond Lane, we had the issue,
You
right?
get into SWIP after a point. I mean, I think it's really grading though. There's the potential for a problem, which is why we talked about it, but it was kind of, did we want to regulate that versus, making it more cumbersome than it needed to be, people clearing for houses and so on. So we left it alone. We didn't want to get into regulating forestry and logging. That was part of the concern.
You said there's no regulation on gardening. Maybe you can set your house. Suppose someone has like 5 acres and they want to start a community garden. Would that not be regulated?
Oh, that's a good one.
I thought so.
Yeah, I think we said home gardens, so if somebody brings in lots of people, you might have to talk, you'd have to ask our zoning appeal officer, what would you do with it?
Home gardening is for your own personal use, when you bring other people into your property.
And it's
to
cars and traffic and
Yeah.
those undesirables who grow tomatoes, so,
But if they have their own little plots and they're growing it for their own house, then
right, but they're all driving in,
they
and
could.
where do they poop when, they get excited about
Where
it?
do they keep their junk?
Yeah,
That would then be a commercial enterprise?
I think so. You might, honestly, you'd
Agricultural?
probably give them, if it was in the R2 zone where you allow ag, I imagine he would either say, you know what, that's a form of ag and it's allowed,
Yeah.
or, you know what, it's not and it needs a variance.
And Christmas tree farms would be ag again,
Those would
right?
be ag, sure. I guess as I talk it through, I would probably call that an ag use.
Until such time it becomes a commercial use where it's a detriment to the community.
Yeah, you have to look at the detail. Good question. It's a tricky one.
You have farm worker housing. Now, I know, I used to work with the health department, and we had migrant labor farming. People come from Jamaica. It only involves one orchard in town of Plattsburgh anyways. That would be Bankers. Is it the town's goal to regulate even the migrant labor, the 5 or more?
Well, the state farm and markets law says that you have to allow those folks to provide housing.
Mhm.
So that's what we did. You can't take that housing and in the off-season rent it to other people. In other words, you can't use it as a way of getting around the zoning to have 10 mobile homes.
Mhm.
But if they want to bring on 10 mobile homes for the migrant labor, the state says you have to. They got to be to code, they got to be sanitary and all that kind of thing.
That's good, because I've seen them in other towns purchase really cheap trailers and then they try to fix them up and then they're trying to get local codes officers in there to say yay or nay. And a lot of them, it's not, they're not involved with that, so it's kind of like fly by the seat of your pants.
Yeah, I hear you. What else you got?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you to everyone who worked on that also. We truly do appreciate it. We'll take it to the next level as soon as we get the resolution. We could have that ready for as soon as this coming Monday. And then we'll get it posted in its entirety. How many pages does it look like, folks? 150? 130?
Plus the tables though, so in the summary, I mean, it's over 150
Thanks. I think just to enable this transition, we're going to take about a 5-minute break and let everybody do what they need to do. That's a case where technology will save us a few hours too. Developers, others who want it, even to have it electronic, they can get to, they can search so much faster what they want. They can remove all the strikeouts, color it all black, still watermark. I think you We should pick Stewart's brain out. But that does make sense, people can clearly see what it was and what it's called.
Maybe, if needed.
It's a good point. Gravel off there, and then slowly start to identify
it will save
So they
the
have to do this thing, this,
Hey, guys.
that.
Thank you, Sue, thank you very much.
And that's, well, they did that last week, and they needed Macy Lane, some Macy Lane agreements for the water supply. And, they have to bring it
They're definitely, the college is kind of saying, so, several things to do.
They had to pay for something.
That's nice, it doesn't slow down. All right, I gotta head out, bye, Tom.
Oh, thanks, yeah, I didn't get that. Did you sign his?
Yes, he did.
Oh, okay. I didn't even see
Are
it.
you running on Cumberland Head on Sunday? I don't run. I can't run. Well, you have a doppelganger. I said that before.
Well, this is snow and ice agreement because they tabled it, that's why they have to bring that back.
And she's like, no, I'm sure.
I don't know what this is something they're gonna do.
That's one thing with the operator that needed
You have a doppelganger, see a mustache?
I don't either.
That's pretty terrible. Two people look like these, like God's wrong.
There you go, the rest of the story.
What was it called?
I didn't think
It was actually Ricky, it wasn't the same mustache.
constantly, he does.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that whole
Don't know. There. Well, I'm anxious to see the whole thing.
About the opposite.
Mink, I don't like that idea, it's awful.
My wife was there, so don't
They
ask him.
stink to high heaven because they have a scent gland.
You'll send her into a
Like a
panic
skunk.
and then she'll call me and then she'll yell at me and then I'm calling out at you.
And
It'll just be easier to
they're
walk my, I've got a
very
friend
nasty.
and I'll have the
My
other.
father-in-law worked for the Sterling Talk Store, and they raised mink. And they're extremely nasty. If they bite, they can bite your finger off just like that. And that's why I don't think they should consider mink. It's not like you tame it and live it in the house.
Being on the handlebar.
The other thing is, we're wondering if they
Somehow I
think
got
of
it in my
this
head.
and just talk about breweries or other things.
Yeah, and.
You know, they're getting, they have a problem with them.
Also, rabbits. Rabbits also carry a very deadly bacteria.
You guys are the.
And that got everybody sick. Got bankers. You know, people got sick from that petting zoo. They got E. coli and this stuff over there.
Down there.
I wanted
Another one
to
came
cover
up.
as much as possible, cutting out as much as possible of the
But mink are notorious. In fact, my father-in-law worked with mink for 60 years and 50. And he tried to tame one, and you can't tame it.
We used to have,
Well, I wanted to,
there's just one area, it's called Pond
Stuart agreed that access
should go this long. That damn thing would go.
Pretty cool animals.
They are. We used to go out and you steal the fish and you catch them.
Absolutely. They're real, but they are incredibly nasty. They make great pillows. Oh, yeah, wild mink, sure. A lot of them would get loose from the fur, not a lot, but you know, some would get loose from the fur farm and they take off. They beautiful. You really can. They're very, very similar and very, very nasty.
The only only thing I'll say is usually May will be a
okay,
lot
let's
of
try to keep
fun. Most Louises all have that.
Of course, now mink are white and gray from breeding and crossbreeding and so on and so forth. I mean, they keep very, but they're not nice.
How many do you have?
And the other thing I should have
17
asked,
exclusive of us, right?
17. You want complaints about noise?
There was a guy who had, that wanted to have the pig farm. He had a rooster, and he lived a half a mile from me, and I could hear it morning. I don't mind it, but a lot of people do.
Okay, I think we will, see if we can get Tom in here and go forward. Yeah, I think Tom, we're starting. We still have.
Tom.
Yeah. Okay, my number 2 item on the agenda, FMLA. I don't think Deborah gave you any copies of anything. This is an item that came, did she? Here. No, that's for
Oh,
Family Medical Leave Act policy. We've got one that was adopted in '96 by the town board. And we haven't had a lot of need to use it. There was one that surfaced recently. And just in a nutshell, if an individual has my interpretation, an individual has a family member who requires their attention, going to be out of work in order to provide support, help, be with that family member, qualifying family member. Then you have the right to family medical leave time. The law generally is addressed in that if that's granted, there's a form. The individual, the employee, would then use their accrued time first. If their accrued time is exhausted, they have a 12-month period that they can be out on this family medical leave time without fear of losing their job. Nutshell.
Is it 12 months?
I think so. Oh, no, you must have worked for 12 months. You can have up to 12 weeks, excuse me. Huge difference, 12 weeks. The number 12. The concern, and none of that we're going to change. I mean, this is
Federal law.
federal law.
That's the federal law?
Yeah.
Federal law.
Yeah, and we basically adopted the federal law.
First thing Clinton signed when he came into office.
If you're 12, if you work for 12.
You have to have worked for 12 months to get this 12-week.
It's unpaid.
Unpaid. And it doesn't apply to key employees.
And so if it goes past 13 or 14,
or like,
if it goes, if it goes past 13 or 14 weeks, they don't have their job guaranteed.
I guess, yeah, that's probably correct.
I think that's fair to say. Doesn't mean you lose it either, but you're protected for that period of time, or the doctor won't know. That really isn't the issue. The issue that surfaced is, we had an individual, I think 10 days might have been used, 10 or 12 days, it really doesn't matter. The conversation was, we also have people who will take a sick day on Thursday because their spouse is having a procedure and they need to be there. So they take Thursday, use their sick time, use personal time, use comp time, whatever. And that's appropriate. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. Now, what if they have a teenager that gets 4 molars removed? And they're out the day the molars are removed, and they're out the next day just making sure they're going to be okay. We let them use sick time for that. Well, what if it's their daughter who has a complicated pregnancy in Arizona in January, and they need to go out there for 4 or 5 days? You can see where I'm going. When do we say, you know, it's go be with your son who had the molars removed and we hope he's feeling better, I'll see you on Monday? And when do we say, That's not you sick, that's a
I think
family
the-
member
I
sick,
think
you
the law-
have to do the
I
act.
think the law states that you have to be one of the only people who can provide direct medical care.
Well, and let's assume it falls into family medical leave act, whatever it is, let's not talk about the, let's just say it is family medical leave, but it's a day. We don't want to run our staff through the process every time. And, you know, we have a lot of women that work, and they're oftentimes the caregiver for the family. Every time they need to take a day to have to plug them into a family medical leave act issue. But there's also a point at which circumstances change, I need more time. Maybe they've been out 6, 7 days, and we say, oh, you really need to do the Family Medical Leave Act. Because now your 12-week period is constantly being pushed out because you're just taking sick time. In the end, for the employer, the employee is going to use their sick time. And with these short issues, it really doesn't have a significant impact. But the question surfaced, and I don't know that we want an answer tonight, but we may want to look for, maybe Jim, you can do a little research.
I don't think Family Medical Leave Act would apply to 1 or 2 days here and there.
I couldn't find anything
I'll check it
that
out.
said there was a minimum, that
Yeah.
if it's more than 5 days, you have to use family medical leave versus just use your
I
sick.
can check.
Is that what it says?
I couldn't find
More
anywhere
than
where it
5 days?
defined,
More than 5 days?
I couldn't find anywhere where it defined a minimum number of days, and
Or a
that's my
maximum?
concern.
Or a maximum?
Well, the max is, you have, the 15 weeks. Once you apply for and you're granted family medical leave time, that window begins.
If you take sick, and you have sick time built up, and you take it for that, and you provide the doctors, which they have to do after 3 days, whatever,
Mhm.
they provide the doctors,
Mhm.
why aren't they allowed to take it?
They are allowed to take it, that's not the question. The question surfaced when we had an individual that we, for the right reasons, said you need to apply for family medical leave time, because it was an extended time to be with a family member, qualifying situation. The question came out, well, how come so-and-so didn't have to, and they were out Tuesday and Wednesday to take care of their family person? I'm only gonna be out 8 days or 10 days. Again, there's no parameter that says, when do we say, stop, you need to do family medical leave? Or, okay, I hope Junior's feeling better.
So in other words, you're saying they just took the sick time for those 8 days?
No, we invoked I invoked the Family Medical Leave Act, that's what it was. And I said we
Which
have to
means
call a
they don't get
spade a
paid for the
spade.
time they're off.
If you use sick time, you're getting paid. There's no problem with that. It's when you're done with your accrued time and you're still on family medical leave that you're not getting paid, but your job is secure in your position, you still get certain accounts.
Can I interject something a little
Yep.
personal? When I was having my back problem before I had the surgery, I was taking time off. There were days that I just couldn't go to work.
Mhm.
And when it became a pattern, not really a pattern, but a number of occasions where I was calling and saying, I can't come to work, my back hurts too much. Then the time and attendance lieutenant called me and said, you need to apply for Family Medical Leave Act.
For yourself?
For yourself. You need to apply for that protection because you're dangerously close to what is considered a time of use situation. If you have a documented ailment and you're taking time off for this documented ailment, and it's not like, okay, today I got a headache, tomorrow I got a backache, next week my ankles hurt. It's an ailment that you're taking time off, time and time and time again. It's covered under Family Medical Leave Act.
Our policy, quote, or all the others, or to care for your serious health condition, which makes you unable to perform the functions of
So
your job.
again, if
So,
we
yeah.
have an employee who has a child who has an ailment, and they take a couple days off this week, and 2 weeks from now, they take 3 more days off, and 3 weeks after that, they take 2 more days off, and it's constantly to take care of one family member, they probably qualify or should be asked to consider Family Medical Leave Act protection. If it's somebody who's, my son's having a tooth removed, and the next week, my daughter fell down and bumped her head, that's not a qualifying ailment.
How does that accumulate? Does it accumulate just the days you took off, or does it accumulate that the whole week because you had days there and you have days there? Once you apply for the medical.
Does it have to be concurrent days? I mean, those are questions that are surfacing as we're now, applying the law.
It applies some legitimacy to the claims that the employee is making. It gives some
Did
protection.
you apply?
Yes, I did.
And you didn't get paid when you're under the
I
act?
used my time accruals. But what it would have done was, if I had reached the point where I had no more accruals, I could take time off without pay and not be afraid of losing my job.
Okay, so it was a little backup for you in a way, that if you went over that.
Right.
And I'm assuming that we would do the same thing, right?
Probably in
They would
most
get paid,
cases.
but if they ran out of accruals, they ran out of all their time.
They could
Difference-
still,
They
they
could
could
still
still
take, but it'd
take.
be under the family leave
The
act.
difference is if they never filed for family medical leave. Through sick time, both situations are the same, but if they never filed for family medical leave, okay, then what could happen is they could be terminated for abusive use of sick time.
Or you couldn't get your position back, you have to take something.
Yeah.
You start all over again. The big thing, Family Medical Leave Act, is it protects your job. That's what it does. Doesn't pay any money, protects your
Well,
job.
our accruals will pay the money if they're out.
Unless
Whatever days they're out, unless they
you're
run out.
unless you're on out.
But the other part of that is, say a guy's got 3 weeks vacation and 10 personal days and a couple sick days, and he uses all that, and 2 days before he's out of time, then invokes the Family Medical Leave Act, looking for 12 more
We
weeks of
just
protection.
pushed him out 12 more.
Exactly.
And that may be the person we don't want to do that, or he's, a snowplow driver, that it's an essential position.
Well, yeah, the only problem is, I think you'd have to be higher up to, like usually, say if you're vice president of sales, they don't protect you. It's one of the few laws that doesn't protect high-level people. Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
But the snowplow driver, although critical, would he definitely be protected.
But to try and really keep the focus with the issue that came right now is we don't want to tell someone they have to apply for family medical leave every time they need a day or 2 or 3 to take care of a family member. You don't want to go through that. There's no need to.
I don't think a doctor would fill
But
out the
what
appropriate
is,
documentation either. It's
but
needed.
what is the cutoff when we say you need to do this? Now, I arbitrarily made the decision because the situation looked like it was going to be a couple of weeks. I said, that's 2 weeks you're telling me. You're not going to be at work. You're not sick. You're taking care of, in this case, a spouse. That's family medical leave. You need to apply for your time under that regulation. There was no concern, the situation was such that it went well. But it surfaced the question, when is the time when we say you must, or how many are enough days to just use your time to take care of a family member?
Supposing that the person with the 2 weeks, they said that was enough, and then they came back. Now, they go the whole 12 weeks. Now, have they used up their family medical leave, even though they didn't take more time off? Do they apply again for family medical leave if after that 12 weeks, that same person needs help and it's more
I don't think you can.
You lose your right, it's a right, you lose your right to come back to your job. You can take off a year, and if you're a great employee, you come back, they might hire you. But you can't come back. Family medical leave protects, like in Jerry's case, if he went out for, say, 8 weeks, he walks back in, they have to give him his job back. And the other way, if you go over the limit, then you might come back, and if you're critical, they might hire you back.
Well, what I'm getting at is the person that went to 2 weeks, they applied for the medical leave act, they can't apply for it again.
And you asking your time.
Why not?
At another time?
I don't know why they couldn't in a
And then
different
how long do they have to
situation.
wait before they can apply for it again?
I don't know, there's a zillion cases, and they're all different, and, I mean.
That's why I'm saying, I don't want to go out there. I just want the simple one of, when I've got someone who says, I need 3 days to take care of grandma, I'm using sick time, I want to be, 3 days, fine. Okay, is it 4, is it 5, is it 2 weeks? When do we say that's family medical leave? You must apply for that leave time.
I think,
It shouldn't be arbitrary.
but I think Jerry had the key is when he got the call from his supervisor, when you're getting to the cliff.
Yeah.
I think that's the trigger. And if you know somebody's got 3 days left, say, hey, you better go, you better invoke them, because
Yeah.
we got a problem.
To protect the
Because he was
employee, right.
saying, yeah, whatever standards they have at the prison, Jerry was getting
He
close
had
to
no
violating.
problem with being able to substantiate a a sick claim, his problem would have been if he had gone through, if he had not filed for family medical leave, if he had gone through the end of that period of time. He could have, they could have filled his position.
No, I totally understand that. And if, you know, we want to leave it the way it is, so it's going to basically boil down to the department head who may request it, or the supervisor who may say, you know, you must apply for family medical leave, or you just turn your back and don't do anything.
But they don't get to apply for sick time unless they're sick.
You can use your
You can use your
accrued
vac-
sick time to be home with a sick child.
Right. Like that, okay, but not, it's not unlimited as to who the person is that you can be caring for.
Our definition, I don't think, does limit it, no. Family Medical Leave Act does limit it. It has to be a qualifying with a doctor's note.
I think our,
Last I looked, our leave time didn't address who. We had that in once and we pulled it out, and that's part of the problem too.
We need to take a look to it
We
and
might,
find out whether or not we want to apply it in the literal sense. 12 weeks, is that 12 consecutive weeks, or is that 12 weeks additive? You know, like, I'm taking 2 days off now, well, I've still got, you know, my 12 weeks
12 weeks minus 2 days. Or is it a
you know,
new
who's
occurrence?
gonna do the math? I mean, you know, somebody's gotta track that.
I've seen experts do the math.
Well, it's, you can do the math, it's just you gotta have somebody assigned to that,
Right.
and
Yes,
believe me, that's, yeah.
I mean, my purpose for putting this here is just to kind of bring it to the table so everybody's aware we're having this and I dealt with it and how I dealt with it. Nobody's complaining, nobody's grieving, but we might want to clear it up. And I would just ask Jim, I could have called him on the phone, but again, it's good information.
What did you use the standard of 1 year?
I used a statement of it was over 2 weeks and it was for a spouse that you need to apply for family medical.
days, right? That's 10 working days.
Correct. Yeah.
Especially if somebody's
But that was
taking
my
sick
decision.
leave.
There was nothing in the guidelines
Somebody
that told me to do that or not to.
I got it.
That's the part, you know,
Justification.
we need a little guidance there. It shouldn't be, oh, Tom, don't worry about it, and Paul, you better apply. And that's what happens, so you don't have guidelines. So if there's anything we can
I will check it
find,
out.
and if it's totally, you know, up to the ruling kingdom, then so be it.
$149 or some annual.
Yeah. Okay, number 3, FOIL request policy amendment consideration is the way this one got
Are
down.
those the orange?
Does everyone have a copy of that in color? I think we did it that way. I've got a couple extras.
I'll take it.
I assume the color is part of this change?
No, it's just the other control.
Oh, okay, all the regular print has been changed, and that's the only thing that's left, policy and policy, okay. good.
I've looked through this, and I'm sure you all have also. The only comment I had was under number 4. And we've just, in the red section, when we note the last red section shall be performed by the assigned staff member and cost for copies will be assigned. I would just change one of those words. I don't want to, will be levied or something. That's the only thing I could find in trying to be critical. I think it's a good job, and I think it helps clarify some things. My concern is, I don't think we ever passed this as a policy. I think it was a procedure. And if we do pass this as a policy, legal question, would it be an amendment of a procedure, or do we just pass it as a policy, rescinding procedure, whatever? Semantics, but that's sometimes what.
Didn't we have this in effect back in 2009? We had a FOIL request policy.
I don't remember if we used the word policy or procedure. I remember having a conversation with Bob Freeman about that. You might have even been on the phone with us. And he said, policy, procedure,
No.
601 half
Look
dozen.
at small print.
Yep,
We got a number. This was a resolution.
resolution
This was passed by
09-215.
resolution. So
Right.
we have a policy, so I think your answer to your question is we're going to amend the policy.
Well, I don't know if we passed it, I should have checked before you brought it up. I
assume
think
we
we did as a
did.
procedure, but it might be because of the resolution.
Adopted by resolution?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll double check that, yeah. Where we are with this evening, you've all had time to look at, is if everyone concurs, we will bring it forward. If there are other changes, suggestions, amendments, then we need to discuss them. And I believe the word procedure was changed in the original document to policy. And that's the only part where I'm saying what I'm saying. If we changed procedure to policy, it might have been passed as a procedure.
I think the title.
Which may be
was
tomato or
exactly the
tomato.
same.
The title was the same, otherwise it would have been red.
Is
That makes good sense, actually.
I have
Is
it.
the bold, is the print in bold print, is that a change?
No.
Or is that what was there?
I don't have the original to reference.
No, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I got this, but I didn't.
Well, Jerry's telling us the only
That-
changes are in
Right.
orange.
The bold lettering was in the original policy that was adopted in 2009. I believe it was put in bold because that was the exact language from the Freedom of Information Law policy.
Okay.
Those are actual quotes. The agency has 5 business days to grant, deny, et cetera, et cetera. More than 20 additional days, business days are needed, et cetera, et cetera. Those are exact quotes.
Because I know most of it was a copy and paste, from the law, as you said, the quote, so it wasn't drafted. Well, by
You know,
silence.
you know what's quite interesting though, is we call it a policy and then we call it a procedure. So we call it a procedure.
Yeah. And to some extent, without, I'm not an English major, the policy is the noun that defines the document. The procedure is how you proceed within the policy maybe. We will bring this as presented.
So really, what should it be, policy? Is that the new policy?
I don't believe in distinctions between the two, but anyway.
You want the resolution you passed in 2009?
Have you got it there?
Yep.
What was the title of that?
Freedom of Information Law FOIL Procedures,
That's what I.
Resolution 09-215.
Procedures?
That's,
Yep,
Okay.
here's your procedures.
What does it say
Town
at
of
the top?
Plattsburgh FOIL request procedure.
Procedures.
And here's the advisory opinion from Robert Freeman regarding it.
I thought we used the word procedure then. That doesn't mean you can't have a policy now. I just wonder if, now we do a policy, are we amending? And maybe we just put it as amending the procedures of Resolution 09-215. That's fine. We don't even need to say that, it is 09-215. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? All right. The next one, I know I forward them, sometimes you stuff them, I just like to make sure you have the next business after hours. Also on there, I believe we have come to some closure with the Macy Lane. I don't know if there are any questions with that. Jim and I spent some time with that today as well. And we will cause to be included that, bless you, that the contract would commence at the completion of 2 requirements. I'm paraphrasing. One being the formation of the Macy Lane District, and the other the installation of the necessary infrastructure, which would really be precursors to anything happening anyway. But it would help clarify it. I think more than once we put a date down for this thing, and it'd actually be a date of a signature, but it can't be in effect until those 2 criteria are met. I can't imagine them having any concerns with that, because that's reality for them as well, and if anything, it saves them from having to pay anything until they're ready. So we would move forward with that adjustment. I don't know if there are any questions.
We passed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But there are a
Think it's
couple,
okay, right?
Well, we're going to make an adjustment. The adjustment is what Bernie just talked about.
Okay.
It's going, the trigger will be formation of the district and installing the infrastructure. Once that's
The only
done.
things that you need to ask is.
Yeah, that, right,
And they have, that's good.
that's perfect, yeah.
that just makes us real comfortable that commencement has a tangible way to measure when it begins. Under resolutions, we do have one that was tabled last Monday that needs to come back today. I think Debbie did a new resolution for that.
Can I ask you another question?
Whereabouts?
You're gonna do resolutions now.
Right. I mean, if your question on something prior or on the resolution?
Well, the other thing we passed, we're supposed to check was the liability for the buses.
Yeah, that's on the liability, is that, I think that's a resolution there too, or maybe not.
I don't have that down. That
No,
was
because we
passed.
passed the contingent upon.
What I did was Joe Labrando sent me a fax today, and I talked to him about 4:30, and he said I had sent something, and he said that's fine, and of course, then when you're on the phone and you read it, I want to make it a little bit stronger. So I said I'll send you another email. And what it is, and I think we discussed in the general thought, we will be liable for our negligence.
Right.
Our negligence.
But that's not what it said.
Pardon? That's what I'm going to send them tomorrow on that.
Oh.
That's what the contract.
That's what we're talking about. That was the idea. We'd be liable for our negligence, they're liable for their negligence. Very kind of standard contract. Sometimes these contracts get, like any and all events that occur, and blah, blah. No, we'll be liable anytime that we are, say, in possession of the bus. If it's our negligence, we will indemnify them essentially.
What are the issues?
Responsible for the whole thing when they were.
What are the issues with dragging with that and many times with things? It was difficult getting a hold of Joe last week. I mean, last week was a difficult week with 4th of July on Wednesday. Some people took the first part of the week with it, some took the last part, some took the whole thing. There weren't many offices playing with all of their players. So that, I'm just waiting for Jim's nod, and he's waiting to get that finalized with Joe, and then we'll sign off on that.
I just want to make sure it was followed.
Yep. Was there anything else before I go into the resolutions? Then we have Resolution 214. Rick, if you've got that, Clinton County Snow and Ice Agreement for 2012-13, 13-14, and 14-15 snow season. If you can read it and bring it to the table.
Whereas the town of Plattsburgh currently provides snow and ice control services for Clinton County for county roads during the winter season. And whereas the Clinton County Highway Superintendent met with the town highway superintendent, it was determined that the towns would enter into an annual snow and ice agreement with the county for the purpose of providing snow and ice control services. Now therefore be resolved that the supervisor be authorized upon approval of the town's insurance provider and the approval as in the form by the town attorney to sign the contract for 2012, 2013, 2013, 2014, and 2014, 2015 snow and ice seasons dated June 25th, 2012, with the County of Clinton for snow removal, sanding, and treating county roads for the 2012 through 2015 season based on the number of miles and rates according to said agreement. And it be further resolved that the town of Plattsburgh agrees to comply with the terms and conditions in the said agreement, and the County of Clinton shall pay the town in 2 installments each year in the sum of $4,645 per mile for regular roads and $5,662 per mile for snowbelt roads during the 2012-2013, and $4,794 per mile for regular roads and $5,832 per mile for snow belt roads during 2013. 2014, 4,938 cents per mile for regular roads and $6,007 per mile for snow belt roads during 2014-2015. It is be further resolved that a copy of this resolution be given to the budget officer and to Superintendent Woods.
Have a motion.
So moved.
Mr. Renedick, second.
Second.
Mr. Mannix.
Bring it up.
Discussion.
Let's bring it back.
I know we go through this frequently. The process we've been using is it just falls off, comes back.
Yeah, it's not off the table, so we
Well, have we found anything out about them too?
can. I haven't pursued it at all. Is that, if that's what, did you read my email or? I listed there's a lot of issues. One of them was the arbitration. And Bernie had said that he was considering talking, I guess, to Mike Zerlo, and then there's some talk. But I think in my email anyway, they said I think we should have one person say whether they want me to or whether Bernie wants to go to whatever. I think arbitration should be in it. Now the question is, I think, is this a deal breaker for us? Let us say I call Bill Favreau or Bernie calls, whoever that's calling, and they say, no, the county doesn't like arbitration of the contract.
I would say no, it's not a deal breaker. Just like after last Monday's work session, you and I, and Marty, I think Paul was there, Tom, I don't believe that, I think you had taken off. You had very adequately and eloquently satisfied my concerns as far as the cost, okay? Basically, we're paying twice, because the lion's share of sales tax money that goes to the county comes out of businesses from the town of Plattsburgh. If we try to hold their feet to the fire for more money, they're gonna want more money in sales tax out of us. And we only have 12 miles. Out of those 12 miles, I didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Woods, but out of those 12 miles, I would dare say at least half of them, we have to travel to get to our town roads anyways. So, I mean, we put the plow down, we plow the roads on the way to the road that we're going to plow, and the only thing we're out is some salt.
So
So what they're paying us is, I think, adequate to cover the salt. I don't think we negotiate or really.
Well, do we ask for the arbitration or and I think we should ask for it.
I'd like to ask for
But
it.
if they turn it down, we say, you win?
No, we tell them, the next time this gets negotiated, this issue will come back up.
And that may be the time because they have a universal agreement with all the other towns. I can't even imagine why the county would balk at that. I mean, it's not to their disadvantage.
Maybe in the interim, Bernie, you talked to all the other town supervisors at your supervisors meetings saying, why wouldn't we want to ask the county, as a unit here, that we would like to see arbitration in these future contracts.
I mean, that's the direction we've been going with everyone we enter into now. And,
Right.
It's a good
It's
process.
less costly, it makes more sense all around.
Absolutely, all the way around for everybody. I will call Mike and have a conversation with him about that. And
Okay.
I'll let you know
No,
what
we don't
happens.
have that.
Pardon me?
I'll vote no.
No.
Well, I mean, we need to do something with this. You might all remember what happened last time around with Black Brook was not a pretty sight. I would like this to stand as a vote to enter into the agreement. I will pursue the arbitration clause, and if it can't be an amendment to ours this time, I will let Mike know that we will not be as quick to sign next time. If that doesn't get in, that I will be having the same conversation with the other supervisors. It's just, something we need to go. But we'll pursue as normal if we have to. I think when you vote tonight, that's what should be in your mind when you vote. We'll pursue that, and maybe it'll work. But we've had most contracts for most years up until recently without that clause. It certainly is a good thing. I don't think we're shooting ourselves in the foot with the county if we don't. If this were a private contractor, I would be a little more adamant. But it is what it is. But so my interpretation of the vote tonight is to go forward as indicated with the effort to get arbitration this time, and if not this time, expect it next. Okay, anybody else have any other comments, questions on that, just to clarify?
Just a comment, if we were to refuse to enter into the contract with them, all that we would effectively be doing is inconveniencing our citizens, the ones that are affected by the timeliness with which our people get to those roads and plow them. If we weren't there to do that, and they had to wait on the county, it would,
It's a tough argument why every other town in Clinton County can agree with this format as they have in past years. And we
The
can't.
other thing too is I'm a great advocate of arbitration, but
I know.
this isn't the type of contract where we're probably getting into a lot of dispute. There's so many miles and there's so much per mile.
Right.
If you can multiply, we're in decent shape.
Yeah. But it is a
But
win-win.
arbitration is still better with arbitration.
Yeah,
In
and we'll,
case something oddball comes up.
we'll expect to have a side letter indicating that if that's what they
Okay,
want.
yeah.
We can do that. All right, any other discussion? Roll call, Rick?
Thomas Wood,
No.
Martin Mannix,
yes.
Paul Moy,
Yes.
Ron Renadette,
Yes.
Bernie Bassett.
Yes, resolution carries. And I will be sure to let you know how the conversation goes out. I'll try to get to Mike tomorrow. And I'll let him know we passed it with that expectation. Next on your list, Resolution 215. I'm sure you saw this when you got the information last Friday. We've had some individual conversations. This, to me, seems like the direction to go at the moment anyway. Let's read it and get it on the table for discussion. Resolution 215, bingo inspector appointment.
Whereas with the passing of longstanding bingo inspector Art Maggie, a vacancy has been created for bingo inspector in the town of Plattsburgh. Now therefore be resolved that the town board, town of Plattsburgh, does hereby appoint Danielle Scholl as the town of Plattsburgh bingo inspector, effective immediately with a term to expire December 31st, 2012. And it be further resolved that a copy of this resolution be given to the budget officer, the town clerk, retirement board, and one place in Ms. Scholl's personnel file.
A motion.
So,
Mr. Lemoyne, second. Mr. Mannix, any discussion?
Yeah, doesn't she have to take an oath of office to be the bingo inspector?
Yeah.
she also has to go to some schooling, which is coming up very soon.
I'd like to amend the resolution to include that the new inspector also take the oath of office within 30 days. Paul, is that okay with you? Marty? Yeah, all right, as amended then. And there is a schooling coming up very soon that, at least verbally, she said that she would be willing to go.
Guess I wasn't here for any discussion on this.
We haven't had any. You knew Art died. We gotta, I woke up the other, I woke up the other day and said, oh my God, we haven't replaced him, and we need to.
So, is this appropriate, and does this mean pay her for the extra duties?
Yeah, I think it gets $2,500 a year, would be
I
prorated.
thought when we talked before about this position, since there was only one bingo, we were talking about lowering the amount.
We did, it was $7,500.
You're thinking 2,500 is?
That's what it got lowered to.
What it got lowered to.
And that's what it's most recently been, and the amount of bingo is the same as it was when we established that.
Actually, Art was making a little more because he had gotten the, whatever percent was, but, in my mind, the new person would start at the 2,500. Which
And
should have been
that's
on
a
here
fair
as
amount.
well. That's what it's been.
That was discussed and agreed to.
What has been was 7,500, and then we went 2,500.
No, but
That
it
was
was
what we had.
discussed.
There was a lot of bingos.
We
and
had
now
3
there's only
bingos. Yep, that's when we had 3 bingos. That's why it's
one. So
25,
how much time is involved?
once a week,
Could be
One
3
Sunday.
hours,
Every Sunday a
every
month.
Sunday.
every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
And the bingo inspector has to be there all the time?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. She's gotta go there, she's gotta
Before it
count,
starts?
she's gotta count all the cards, she's gotta count heads, she's gotta match up the cards and the heads.
Has anybody here ever been to bingo school?
I've not been to bingo school. I've not been to
I went to Catholic school.
I
guess I played it when I was 6 or 7. I don't recall anything beyond that.
Thanks.
And really, the salary piece,
bingo.
yeah, the salary piece is important because another game of chance that qualifies could start and require our inspector to go out, and we'd have to revisit it.
Yep.
I mean, you do the math on that, 2,500, 52 weeks every Sunday, and the reports and the response, yeah, it is not a lot of money.
Is there an assistant bingo? Just a curiosity,
not
the bingo
eligible.
inspector goes on vacation, do they shut down the bingo?
That actually came up in discussions with Danielle. She said, what would happen if I got sick and I weren't able to do that? And I said, I don't have an answer for you on that one. You know, right now, we don't have a bingo inspector. We try to solve that problem first, and then we'll look at whether or not we need to have a, you know, emergency deputy bingo inspector.
Well, it seems to me, assume that somebody might take a vacation at some point.
Yeah.
Especially when it's
It
every
might go over a
Sunday.
weekend.
Like I said, we'll get problem number one taken care of, then we'll work on problem number two.
Finding someone to do that with that responsibility for that salary every week is not an easy task. She was willing. And I think she'd do a good job.
Okay.
You know, I think she pays good attention to detail. Any other discussion? As amended, indicating that the oath of office is to be taken within 30 days and at a rate of salary prorated at $2,500 a year.
And do we have to put in, we have to attend the school or not? Or is that-
I would rather not put in that she has
Okay.
to. We haven't done that with anybody else.
Bernie, what would the procedure be if somebody else wanted to have bingo, another Legion or something?
I believe they'd have to
They
see
get permitted.
Steve about the permit,
Yeah.
go to the
Yeah.
clerk's.
We have to file a thing with the state onto it, with the controller's office onto it.
And if they got a license, we'd have to
Yeah.
inspect them.
Yeah.
But it's games of chance, and we really get focused on bingo. It could be, I remember looking at that, I don't recall, but there are a number of different items that could
Same thing, with
be
the
included.
bingo, games of chance, those pull tabs and all of that stuff,
Guess
are
your
all
weight at
regular.
the fair.
Huh?
Guess your weight at the fair.
Yeah.
So does she inspect like the pull tabs at the fair and stuff too, is that?
No, we license them, they have to have a state license onto it to buy them, to get the pull tabs from the company onto it. They have to have our stamp on it, that they're registered with us, within our territory onto it.
I
So-
think the state regulates them, like the.
Right, well, the state, it's all a
Fireworks
state
and
form,
games
once
and
they're
things.
registered with the state, they file it with us within the township, whatever township or city ship that they're in onto it, and then it's up to us to police them or whatever.
I think like Jim said, none of us have been to bingo school, and, I mean, Danielle
Well-
goes, she's gonna come back with information.
If you remember,
And they get an education.
if you remember like 3 years ago when all that stuff with Post 20 came down, that's where it all started. Because they weren't filing the bingo reports with us, and they weren't doing this, and they weren't doing that, and, you know, so we started looking into it, and we have limited ability to do it, so then that went to the controller's office. And when they came down, and then there was a whole can of worms there, so.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
Thomas Wood?
Yes.
Martin Manick?
Yes.
Paul Moy?
Yes.
Troy Bennett?
I want to say yes.
Bernie Bassett?
Yes, carried. Okay, you have the minutes of the previous meeting to look through before Monday, by Friday morning at the latest. Oh, I should also
I didn't
know,
find anything in those.
I went to Buck's Corners today. The guys are putting the, yeah, they were lighting its, not the armor, the binder.
The binder coat.
Nice
Nice job.
job. They really did improvements, and I swear, every time I walk around that, you see that trickle of water and look at what it caused. It just blows my mind. Thank God for FEMA. That would have been an expensive one.
When it got fixed.
It probably wouldn't have. That's a lot of money for convenience.
That's exactly what it was.
And that one was especially interesting to me because I got to see it from, before, after, all the stages, taking care of, remember that natural gas line?
Yep.
Hanging there.
I almost hated to go by there for that thing dangling off a rope holding it to a guardrail that was dangling.
If I'd seen
Oh.
somebody walking toward me with a cigarette in their mouth, I wouldn't have been there.
But they truly did do a good job, and it was really teamwork, and, let them know. We have one more very small project. It's a mitigation at the East Morrisville Park that Highway said they do. And we're going to submit
Pretty soon, they won't even have to work in the water.
Pretty soon is right, you're right. And we'll submit for Bucks Corners, and then on my very short list is to go after the missing money that we haven't gotten from the state. From the day the governor announced they were gonna pay 100%, I haven't gotten anything. And up to that, we were getting all but the 12. So, anyway, but thank God, it really worked well for us. We got some good work done. The guys worked, I don't know if you saw the walls they put up on the head either. This is work they didn't do before. This is work, you kind of quickly get on the phone, you hire subcontractors to come in. They did it, and they did it really well, and they learned and saved a lot of money. So anyway, proud of them.
We've got
Historic.
some guys out there that have really got skill sets.
Oh boy, I
That are
guess.
far beyond what the skill sets would be for people to drive a truck.
Stereotypical town highway, you bet.
Well, they're guys, but like, they've done all kinds of construction work in their history, and they like doing it.
That's the key.
It's different,
They're willing
breaks
to
up
do
their,
it.
breaks up this,
We've got our historian's report, you can read it. Again, this guy just doesn't stop. The things he's doing, I don't even know if you're well aware, he put together a display for the 4th of July parade in the city. He now has recruited Melissa Facto, another retiree, who's helping him voluntarily to achieve some of his goals of scanning and creating displays of the historical photos and letters and artifacts. The guy's just amazing.
Our historical committee may soon be the biggest committee.
Oh my God, it may, the department maybe, and the cheapest. And the archaeological dig, I spoke with, Keith Herculo today, and they're out there. The Pikes Cantonment piece is a very important future part of the town of Plattsburgh, and the role that history played in our bounds. Some exciting things happening. I know I shared the historical registry piece coming. So there's just good stuff, and Jerry's, he's like that ever-ready battery boy. You just wind him up and he's gone. So take some time with that, enjoy it. When you see Jerry, give him an attaboy. Rick, I had a note that we had some new reports from you.
Yep.
And I have a note that I'm supposed to distribute these. So there's a couple, there's one. And I would assume, Rick, you don't need it.
Oh, you got one.
This is revised from the one that,
Yeah, the old one you can throw away, just use that new one.
Rick, anything of any highlight you wanna?
No, as you can see, the dog stuff is way up again, still up again. We haven't,
Place is going to the dogs, they were right.
we haven't fallen off on that. That's just been a plus all the way.
Yeah, usually when the state hands you something, it's, thanks for the gift, right? But
Yeah.
boy, in this case, it's
Yeah.
really not hurt at all. Good. Weddings continue to be ongoing, and
I've got 3 this week.
just,
Yep.
I don't know what that's telling us, but boy, people are getting married, and
They ever have like a sale on these?
we're a special this week.
Well, it was a funny thing.
Groups of 10 or more.
I had one there last week that ended up in a dispute, so they didn't,
prior to the ceremony?
Yep.
Oh, that's sweet.
How much prior, just out of curiosity?
Did they walk out without getting married?
Yeah, well, they didn't get married, so.
They didn't get married.
Didn't like that.
No, but
Didn't
how-
like that worst
Prior
part.
prior girlfriend.
Oops.
But that part when you say, does anybody here,
Yeah.
she stood up and,
When she come through the door, yeah.
ooh,
Yeah, so,
You should have got
we're not
half,
going any farther.
you should have got half the money anyway, son.
oh my God, I thought that only happened in movies.
When they come in carrying a baby.
About the Plattsburgh.
Yeah.
Planning Department monthly report, again, things are still happening. There's a lot of rumbling out there still of exciting things, and I know you've heard some. I really liked the editorial the other day. I don't know if you caught the one that was written about change, and they were reacting to manjus. And, you know, I've been saying that a lot lately. When you look at this community and some very big and very successful operations that have come and gone, Pal Blade, big employers, things change. And as, you know, we live long enough, we'll see that. And a lot for us, and that's the code rewrite that's exciting. They're trying to stay ahead of what will be needed to, you know, be ready for the next thing. We don't want to cry every time we lose something, because the setback's an opportunity for a setup. And there are a lot of rumors floating that there are some new things coming in that spot and close by that spot. And there's stuff happening. So anyway, we get to read between the lines a little with some of these reports that we've got. The codes department gave us late today their report that I probably should have copies of for everyone. There's George's. And for Ricky, we got one. Somebody was talking today in the office about a huge land sale, a property sale, which nobody seemed to know what it was, couldn't identify it yet. It was a few $1 million. $5 million was the number. So that usually means something's going to happen as well.
So the airport's finally been sold.
Yeah, that wouldn't be $5 million, but you know, they are doing things out there to better prepare it. They're in a better position now. You'll see some demolition going and some borings being done. County's been pretty good about communicating with us on things like that lately. A little better than even a couple of years ago. I've also got a note that I wrote this evening. We're going to get a resolution to receive and place on file the draft rewrite with the steps and procedures of our ordinances and the FOIL policy. So those two will be added as of tonight.
So that resolution will also that we can put it on the.
And posted on the website. Yeah. As much as
I told people, you know, they should be able to look at it on the website.
Yep. There's no inexpensive way to
No?
get room and board anymore. I mean, it's crazy.
I was pointing on that sheet, there's a modular home on there for $200,000, and there's another one on there for $150,000.
A lot of money.
For
And the seller will
modular
tell you it's better than a stick built. Who knows?
And then put it up, buy the property and put it up. You know Brian Rabideau's son built
Yeah.
that little one? I think he told me that was in the 175 range by the time he got it up, and that's tiny. It's really cute. But it's
And that's a good point. You need the property, the water, the sewer, the whole
Yeah.
landscaping, driveway, and garage.
And that's just to buy it, Marty?
It was a sale press.
Usually that's installation.
Shipping?
Modular home on Route 3, $200,000. Modular home on Wheeling Avenue.
Oh, so these are already put up?
$150,000.
Yeah, it's expensive.
That's new. It should be.
It's going on a 5-foot crawl space, $150,000.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Just one other thing, I appreciate you all appointing me to this committee. I know you figured I probably had nothing to do.
We wouldn't have any choice but
because
to put
the,
you on it.
I know I nothing to do since the we're gonna finish the code and stuff. It says, oh, okay, so we'll put them on another committee here.
We gotta call.
We were concerned we might cut into the ping pong.
By the time I found out about this one, I missed the first meeting.
Oh, I know, and that's why I told them, but as soon as I saw your name wasn't there, I told them you were out of town, but I wanna make sure you're kept in the loop. That,
So
that,
I did miss the meeting.
that Smart Streets Steering Committee is going to be very good. There is a great think tank there. Yeah. There really,
Well, I guess
really
more
is.
people like to put on it too.
I knew that, but you have to talk to somebody else, that's not mine.
Oh,
But that is a great,
you put me on it, but you can't put me
and
on.
I'll tell you, Tom, today Jim came in and he has a section that he's going back and adding that was road paved between 374 and 3, the lower end of the Yankee Road, and there wasn't a sufficient shoulder, thank you, that would be the word, because people use that a lot for walking, biking. He's going back and fixing it, because he's aware of that stuff, yeah. I said,
Well,
that's
the
great,
whole thing
where
we
we
wanna
can do it.
That's the whole goal. And this
Good
is
stuff.
pretty impressive too.
Yeah.
I've got,
Speak now or.
Shortly
We're
after
ahead
I
of
got
highest
on the
score
board,
of these
there were people at the Plattsburgh
It's a good sign.
were complaining because the shoulder was not paved, and there were a lot of residents in wheelchairs.
Good reason to be optimistic.
however, I have some uses for that one.
The sand,
Going at rain and all that other
it
stuff.
took
And the other
bad.
one, we're trying to shut it up. I said,
to pave one side.
I said, you
That's all
guys
we
have
asked
your
for,
differences,
just pave one
and then
shoulder.
come back to me,
People
and
to
then,
safely go,
you know,
you know,
we'll
they wanna get
proceed
out, they wanna
farther.
enjoy the.
Anybody have anything else for this evening?
Year and a half.
If not, I'm gonna call us adjourned at 8:27.